All right, let's get started. Welcome everybody to the Validator community call. I just want to start off by saying thank you everyone for participating in the last restart. They're never fun and it's always a bit of a fire drill, but I would say this last one was very smooth and very well coordinated, and a lot of good work from validators, RPC operators, and developers all together. So good job, and yeah, appreciate all of you. Couple announcements to make. So as you know, part of the restart was a bug in nonces. Nonces are currently disabled in mainnet and in testnet. And that feature will not be out this week, but will likely be out sometime soon, probably next week. As part of that, there will be a feature that is activated to enable this new nonce code. So just be ready for a feature activation, especially RPC operators will need to be on the latest version and ready for the feature flag to be switched. Let's see. Yeah, so as part of that, if you are on testnet, make sure you're on 1.10.24 on testnet. We have about 90% of the stake there, but about 5% that's not delinquent that could still update. And then if you are on mainnet beta and you already are on a version of 1.10, make sure you can upgrade there to 1.10.24. Only if you are currently on a 1.10 version. Any questions on all that? Okay, great. So in brief, if you're on testnet, 1.10.24. If you're on mainnet and you're on a 1.10 version, also 1.10.24. A quick announcement about the delegation program. So there have been a couple bugs with the program. The sign up has been broken for a while, about a week or so for the delegation program sign up process. It is now fixed, so you should be able to sign up without any issue. Let us know if there's any bugs that you find, but someone has gone through the process recently and it seemed to be working. Another issue there is the stake bot for testnet is currently down. We're investigating that and trying to fix it. It looks like an issue with the RPC we're talking to. So trying to get to the bottom of that now, but stake on testnet is not currently being updated. Any questions about delegation stuff? Okay, great. Now a couple other things. I put in the agenda a link to have a one-on-one chat with me. So if anyone is interested in just talking, getting to know each other, giving feedback of any kind about, how the validator program could be improved, how the delegation program could be improved, how anything that's on your mind really, there's a link in the agenda for this meeting to have a one-on-one call with me. So feel free to use that anytime you like. A little background here, I've been talking one-on-one with some validators and found the interaction pretty useful just to find out what's interesting to you, how I could be more helpful. So I'd love it if more people took advantage and just reached out. Another thing there in the agenda, there's a hardware survey that we're sending out. Alex, who runs the server program, is trying to get a better idea, and the foundation in general, of what hardware you all are using. So if you could take a few minutes, even just take a few minutes right now and fill that out for testnet and mainnet, what CPU, what memory, and what hard drive spec you're using, that would really help us out. It only takes about a minute or less. So please fill that out. Oh, and it's an anonymous survey. So no personal information is recorded, just info about your hardware. Yeah, I think that's all the updates. Any questions on any of that stuff? No? All right, cool. All right, so for a talk today, we've got Dan from Holoplex. Holoplex is an NFT marketplace that does some really cool stuff in open source. So Dan's going to talk about the Geyser plugin and their implementation of it, or their implementation that uses the Geyser plugin. So Dan, take it away.
Hey all, yeah, Dan, CTO of Holoplex. Really excited to go over our Geyser implementation today. First, it'd be appropriate to thank Brian Long for all his help kind of getting it off the ground. He's our validator provider, our RPC provider. and has been super helpful in figuring all this out. It's been a journey. We've been doing it for what, 4 months now?
Yeah, it has been a journey. Everything.
Yeah.
We're doing everything for the first time.
Yeah, we were on it when it was still Accounts DB back in the old days, about 3 months ago. And so I was going to talk about the overview of our approach on the consumer side. So like what happens when the data leaves Geyser, and then go over the hardware specs of that entire stack, as well as why open source has been really helpful here, and we're going to continue to lean into it. And then talk about some of the challenges we faced, both on like the validator side and on like the kind of what we call the consumer side, which is like the ingesting of the data. And so if you think about like the whole Geyser system as a ETL pipeline, the validator kind of serves as the extraction point, and then transforming and loading are what we do on the Olaplex side. So the way that sort of our approach is we try and present this like unidirectional data flow for all our applications, where you send data to RPC when you sign a transaction with Solana, but every read, we no longer rely on WebRPC or JSON RPC. We go right to a GraphQL endpoint served in front of the indexed data. And so from the validator and from Geyser, we wrote our custom Geyser plugin, and we send all our data, accounts data, and to RabbitMq. And then from there, we have several consumer instances that read off that queue system and process the data and shove it into Postgres. The processing, we wrote that processor, or the consumer we call it, that's all in Rust, and we import the program code from the Solana protocols that we're indexing to use their deserializers to take apart the account data and then convert it into Postgres types. And so that's been really useful because you have kind of you can deserialize the structs really quickly, efficiently, and then you know exactly what they contain. And then converting them into Postgres types is somewhat trivial after that. Additionally, it allows us to index the data more intelligently because we have the contract code right in our code base. And so we know what it's supposed to do, how the data is used, and how other people might want to query it. And so that's been really helpful. By the way, I can post a link to the repo of everything I'm talking about here, which might be helpful. That's the indexer repo. And so we consume the data using the program code, we shove it into Postgres, and then we also have a GraphQL endpoint that sits on top of everything so you can query it readily. I can go into hardware specs of that entire stack and post a link to those. One second here. And so here's a link to some of our hardware specs. And so just kind of working through what we have to work with. We have 5 kind of consumer instances, which are M5X largest on AWS, so 16 gigs of RAM. And those have the ability to scale horizontally as the number of messages in the queue stack up. So when a validator restarts, we get every account from all time into our RabbitMQ instance. At last count, it was like 25 million messages because we listened to a select number of programs. That's a lot to process. And so we use RabbitMQ as sort of like to kind of handle the back pressure of that. So we don't have to load all of those into Postgres all at once. Excuse me. On the persistence layer, we have, right now we have 2 Postgres instances that have a terabyte of storage each and 64 gigs of RAM. And there it's a standard kind of primary writer setup with a replica for reading. The Postgres instance has 100 gigs of storage and 32 gigs of RAM, the RabbitMQ instance. And then we have like a variety of like logging and instrumentation stuff built in as well like Grafana and all of that to make sure everything's kind of running smoothly. One of the areas that I also want to talk about is kind of the open source approach and what's been fun there. We have a number of protocol developers coming to us having the same problem of like, hey, how can I access my data quickly? And how can I do like aggregate queries like counts and complex filters, the things that make, you know, JSON RPC isn't great at. And so an approach that we've taken with several of them, so Strata and Cardinal and BridgeSplit, is they come and they send us an open source pull request to index their protocol. And then we provide a service and charge them to serve the data back to them as it comes in real time. And so this has been a really nice arrangement for everyone because they have open source code that they get to keep, and then it's their protocol, so they're able to index it intelligently and efficiently in a way they want it to be queried. And then we're able to provide a valuable service. Additionally, it allows for really fast and performant cross-protocol queries where you can link from one wallet address. You can see every protocol they're participating in and that we index, which is like 20 or so. And so for a given wallet, you can see the Twitter handle they linked in the naming service. You can see the NFTs they own. You can see like things they might have fractionalized with BridgeSplit and all kinds of other things in between. And so that's allowing for some really powerful applications to be built on top of the index data set. And all of that is 100% open source, which is great. In terms of challenges we faced, which I think is most relevant to this group, excuse me, indexing non-fungibles was actually like one of the harder things we had to deal with. So all non-fungibles are part of the Solana token metadata or the token account, the token cake program. And so if you set your validator to spit off accounts from the token cake program, you end up getting pretty much everything on Solana. I think initially when we launched the kind of Geyser plugin or accounts DB, it was too much bandwidth really for the plugin to support. And so what we do is we import the fungible token list and load it into a hash set in memory on the validator and filter out any token keg, any account who is in that list. And so all the fungibles we don't send over the wire at RabbitMQ into the whole system. We just look for the metadata. So that was one challenge. I think maybe Brian can speak to a few of the others we faced, but I think we found that like you can run into memory pressure limits on the validator pretty quickly if you are like doing too many writes to RabbitMQ or in the wrong order. And a big question that we get a lot of times is like, why do you use RabbitMQ at all? Why not go directly to Postgres? Having the validator be responsible for acquiring a thread to write to Postgres, you know, writing to it in the background and returning it to the pool. If that doesn't happen in 400 milliseconds, then you can run into a lot of memory issues on the validator, right? Because there's going to be a new block every time. You have to acquire them and return them faster than the new block comes in. So RabbitMQ lets us kind of like have a kind of safety net and backstop. You should be able to do most Postgres writes in under 400 milliseconds, but if you have a poorly written index or a developer writes a bad query on an upsert, you can kind of run out of time pretty quickly there. Those are just kind of some of the challenges. Happy to like take any questions or talk more about any of that, those aspects.
Hey, Daniel, you guys did a great job with this thing. And I hear plenty of people in the ecosystem talking about what you've done. So, you know, kudos to you and your team for putting in the hard work and doing all this stuff for the first time. The current RPC stack deals with a lot of read-write convention issues where, you know, heavy reads can stop the validator from writing. Have you noticed any read-write contention issues after you've moved that into Postgres? You know, is there a limit to how hard or how many reads you can put in before Postgres starts to slow down with its updates?
So right now we're processing about like, I think it's like on RabbitMQ, it's like 600 messages a second. And we have two validators running. One, we do two for redundancy issues and two types of redundancy really. One is so we never miss a message. And the other is like typical failover redundancy if one goes down, which we yell at Brian and he fixes it. But in terms of like contention, yes and no. So you have to, because when you start up, you get every account from all of time. You need these behaviors to be atomic. Like you can just get any account at a random time, right? So you have to treat it that way because it kind of works that way. And that is compounded by having two validators. So we haven't really seen that kind of contention. Sometimes when we're doing the query to find out if we need to upsert or just do a new insert or do nothing at all, you can see a little bit of slowdown, but that's not really like a Solana RPC issue. That's kind of like you could fix that with a different database implementation or sort of a different way of querying your data. So we haven't really seen like that kind of slowdown. The latency has been really impressive. And I think like one really cool like party trick we like to do is you can mint an NFT and it'll be in our database before the browser confirms it, which is kind of cool because it's so much faster than the WebSocket connection to WebRPC, which is great. I don't know if I answered your question, but maybe.
No, you did. That's great. I mean, the fact that you don't see a problem is really the best answer. And because so great work.
I think this question in the chat was meant for me, and it's a good one. So yeah, this requires some trust on behalf of the DApp, which is new if you're doing if you're used to a traditional RPC DApp. One of the things that like helps with that is open source. Like it's still open source. You can see the code. Additionally, like we took a really strict policy in this database. All of the data is represented by on-chain data, either in RWE by PFS or Solana. And so the validators and the whole stack, the indexer and its stack have this really neat trick where you can blow away the entire Postgres database, restart the validator, and restore state exactly how it was. And so yeah, theoretically, we could produce this fake data, but we really believe the open source component helps with that a lot. And we haven't run into anyone like with trust issues yet. I'm sure they're out there. No one can verify that we're running source. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and you guys released open source software, so anybody can do it on their own.
Yeah, they can run it themselves and don't trust us. Yeah, like that's the solution to provide. Yeah. And just to speak a little bit to that, the people who use this data, like we're under SLA and contract. It's like a more normal SaaS relationship. And so I wouldn't really want like a random developer just coming in and building on some open endpoint. It doesn't, that's a RPC feature, not so much a feature of this service. Yeah, thanks for the question. That's a good one.
I've got just more of a general question. Do you see other applications for Geyser beyond NFTs?
Yeah, and we've talked to some of them. So we talked to the guys at Step, really smart, one of the earlier DeFi apps in Solana, I think. And they forked our code to do, it's a pretty crazy thing they want to do. They want like real-time fungible updates in the browser. So they're going to have some like WebSocket system that connects directly to RabbitMQ. Much different use case than what we're doing, but great Geyser thing, right? Where real-time data is just so important. And then additionally, we use it for NFT stuff, but a lot of the protocols that use us, like they have overlap with NFTs, but aren't explicitly about it. So we index all of Bonfida and cardinal identity protocols, which allow you to link Twitter or like your .sol domain to a pub key. And so that's been really useful. We index some of the Realms and Smart Wallet protocols, so for DAO voting systems. So we can kind of give people more granular data about how people are voting in their DAO, which has been really interesting. And I think there's a lot more to explore there. Because that's like a really rich data set. You know, it's how many tokens have you staked, like what's your voting record, how many other DAOs are you in? We can provide all of that. in like a much more performant way. Like if you wanted to do, business intelligence with RPC, it's really challenging. And so you need that index data set. We haven't dipped our toe too much into kind of the other DeFi protocols, but I think that there's a lot of use cases available out there.
Cool, thank you.
Right on. Thanks for having me.
Any other questions for Dan? No? All right. Any other questions in general that people want to bring up before we end the call? All right, cool. Well, thanks everyone for joining, and see you all in 2 weeks or in Discord.